Welcome to the Jess Larsen Show on innovation and leadership. I'm super excited for this episode. Co-hosting again with my friend Lindsay Hadley. Linz, will you introduce our guest?
Yes, thank you so much for having me on, Jess. And we're so thrilled to have the talented actor, now director, Kyra Sedgwick on our show today. This is a woman who has had a phenomenal career in the film industry, from Golden Globe and Emmy Award winning debuts, and now this is essentially her big screen feature directorial debut. Although, Kyra, you've had some great experience as a director in television. We're so thrilled to have you on to talk a little about what's going on in your world and big solutions to major world problems that we're passionate about. And it's so fun that you're using drama and comedy, romantic comedy, as a way to address some of the things that are so important for us to be discussing in today's world. So, Kyra, thanks for coming on the show.
Thank you so much. I'm so glad to be here.
We're so thrilled to have you, Kyra. So I was mentioning right before we started that I've had the chance to work with your darling husband, Kevin Bacon, who through his work at 6degrees.org, which is his foundation. I've been really working with Stacy, who's the executive director, for years. She's a dear, dear friend. And I'm so passionate about what you guys are doing as a family and his work and utilizing his fame and his platform to wrap around, causes that are whatever's going on in the current domestic cycle. Like, it's amazing how much he just activates around what's going on. Both of you have been incredible activists for things. Maybe we can start off by sharing a little bit of your background of philanthropy, and also maybe you can share with us a little bit of the story of, at a high level, of how you got into film and how you've been using film to then activate around issues you care about.
Yeah. It's funny. It's Stacey Abrams. I've heard her speak, and she always talks about her family and how her family inspired her to do good in the world. And that, her parents always took them to the soup kitchen to work the soup kitchen once a week. And that, the whole family organized around giving back. And that was not my experience growing up. My father was an entrepreneur. My stepfather was an art dealer. My mother was a therapist, although I guess she was giving back in that way. She worked with children with learning disabilities. But I think that it's my my deep sense of justice. That's like an innate thing for me. It's like, that's so unfair. I have to do something about it. That really is my engine, for all things philanthropic. It's the outrage. It's it's how untenable things feel when they're unfair. And there's plenty of opportunity for that in America. Our capitalist society built on inequality and on, white supremacy and slavery. And I mean, the whole thing was built wrong on some level. So there's lots of work to be done. So I think that's sort of the genesis of my ongoing passion for things that seem so obvious and unfair. So I think that, understanding what was going on in the environmental space 30 years ago when my first son was born, it was out of my own need for his survival that I became infected or compelled to do something, and get educated and learn about what is going on. And it's not easy to be educated. It's easier to put your head in the sand. Thank God my soul won't let me do that, because whether I make a difference or not, at least I know I'm fighting the good fight, and I feel like I am fighting the good fight always. Many people would probably disagree with my what I choose to fight about, but I know all I can only do is right for me, and what's right for me is to fight and speak about atrocities and things that are happening in the world and feel like it's my problem. It's funny, I have a I have a member of my family who's like, it's not my problem, not my problem, not my problem. And I'm like, wow, I almost wish I could be like that, you know? I mean, I have like a little bit of, you know, moral outrage and disdain for that. But there's this part of me that kind of wishes that I too could put my head in the sand. You know, it would make my life easier, at least for the moment, but I wouldn't be helping to uncover things that I feel are important to uncover. And whether that's like uncovering like bad habits of my own or bad habits of my family, or shining light on difficult subjects, you know, in film or TV, or it's going out and standing on a picket line, or going out and marching for pro-choice, or making a movie about, you know, the depression of 20-somethings, you know, in the world that we're leaving for them. So I think all of those things are at the heart of why I do what I do. As far as my 41 years in the business, I mean, you know, I'm lucky enough to be in a place in my career, and I have been for a very long time, where I could choose to make things that felt important, and that felt worthwhile. And, you know, I did this movie called The Woodsman 30, almost 25 years ago or something, about a pedophile who's a recovering pedophile with Kevin, actually. People were like, why did you do that movie? And I'm like, because there are people in the world that are pedophiles. So we need to talk about them. We need to shine a light on it. Like, ignoring it and pretending it doesn't exist and pretending it's not a disease that you can, you know, seek recovery for is like insane to me. You know, not talking about climate in television movies is insane to me, you know. So I'm not, you know, talking about mental illness, you know, in film and television feels like a calling and something important, you know, for me as well. So anyway, that's a very long answer.
No, it's a stunning answer, Kyra. Like, I'm sitting here thinking, it's not lost on me at all that the cost of that integrity that you have, that personal accountability, is a lot bigger for you and your family because you're in the public eye. I mean, right? Like, relative to everybody in their own ecosystem, when they stand up for something that they believe they have to, there is a cost. There's conflict, there's fallout, there's judgment, there's ridicule, there's interpersonal dynamics that are very real. Our brands are, you know, it is easier to be quiet and stay in the middle and be on, you know, not rock the boat, and you don't put yourself in the you know, mark of others whose rage might respond to what you're challenging. And you guys have it at a global level. That is an unprecedented amount of responsibility you're taking. I really admire you for it. And, you know, I think I love how you, something I noted that when you talked about it, now your language, you give this deferential energy that, look, some people might not agree with me. Like, you hold the space for the fact that there's variant, you know, views, and that there's different come froms, but you're saying, this is my truth and I have to have integrity in this, and I'm driven this way. And it comes from a place of love. It comes from a place of care. And I think that shows a lot of your heart. And speaking of your heart, this film, talk about the most stunning cinematography ever. Jess and I were talking about before, these cinematic shots of whether it's the night sky that makes you just feel the wonder and majesty of this universe, or whether it was these, you know, sun-setting farm scenes with the beauty of nature. I mean, and then the emotive, like the way you could capture people's eyes and the emotional interpersonal experience that's going on in the film between these characters. What an unbelievable eye you have. Did you always have this eye? Like, as a kid, I mean, you know, you obviously dress beautifully. Have you always had this artistic eye? Is this something that was cultivated in you by your family, by your childhood?
I don't know. I mean, I think that I grew up around a lot of great art. I grew up around, like, my stepfather he bought the first Rothkos and Jasper Johns and Pollocks and Rauschenbergs and Kleins and Gottliebs. And I mean, he had a real eye for that modern, those modern paintings very early on, like he had an incredible eye. So I grew up like kind of in a gallery, our home was his gallery space. And so I definitely grew up around not just art, but great art, empirically great art, like unequivocally great art, so, and we had some best of those paintings. And so I definitely think that seeped into my consciousness in a way that I don't even know. Good ways and bad ways, I think, aesthetically, but also emotionally. But I always had a very keen eye for the truth in film and TV, like when someone was telling the truth, and I the truth of a scene, the truth of a character. I can spot it really quickly. And I think that's sort of my secret sauce around directing, is knowing when I'm seeing the truth and trying to just get at that truth always. And not afraid of the messy, not being afraid of going there, with the dark parts, even when in a sweet, lovely, loving film like this, not being afraid to go deep. So I think that quest for truth, on some level, seeing it as well as being it, has been something that's been, it was innate in me. And yeah, I really wanted to make this a celebration of the planet. I wanted to make it a love letter to the planet, sort of in hopes of what could be more, timely and telling than a guy who thinks he can go to Mars and leave all his problems behind. And yet, the irony of I've got he's living on a flower farm, the most beautiful flower farm in, all of the world, in my opinion, definitely in Rhode Island. And he's picking an uninhabitable planet, because he's scared, because his heart's been broken, whether it's seeing the climate change firsthand as a farmer, or it's the loss of a brother. Life is painful and difficult, and the choice that he makes ultimately is, or this whole family makes, is life is painful and difficult, and we wouldn't be anywhere else. Life is painful and difficult, and the planet is suffering. I wouldn't exchange this place for any place in the world, and hopefully, the climate message for me is fall in love more with the planet, and then hopefully we will want to take care of it more,
Oh, that's so deep and eloquently put. I love it. My friend Ibrahim Al-Sini, who was the executive producer of the film, one of the executive producers, I know he spent his life as an activist. People see him as a lot as an investor in climate, but that's just the tool he used to get to the truth as well, right? He wanted to find solutions. And I know Jess just adored this film. We were just talking before how much he liked it. But Jess, what does this bring up for you? I'm sure you have tons of questions.
Yeah, I definitely do. So I'll be honest. I was going to just skim the movie. Okay. I was I need to have some reference. And so I didn't start it till really late last night. And you completely hooked me. So I was up till 2 a.m. watching the whole thing. And I want to talk about the craft of directing, because it's obvious that you have studied the craft. I mean, obviously, you get from age 16 on, being an actress, being around the industry and all these things. And then I've heard you talk about at age 50, you're no, I'm ready for the next challenge. I'm going to do this. And I think about my growing up years, you're kind of known for being a kind, I just had to guess you're really a kind person in real life, because in so many of your movies that shows up, I'm thinking about Heart and Souls back with Robert Downey Jr. and you're getting this crusty guy to be a better version of himself. I'm I know it's a scripted movie, but I feel there's the real you in there too. And so you've talked about empathy being a superpower for you. And when I'd heard that before watching the movie, and then seeing the interactions and your willingness to let there be the discomfort real life, but then also to be the forgiveness real life. Can you talk about, taking advantage of your superpower with empathy and really the craft of directing?
Yeah, I think that they're very connected, really. I think that you have to fall in love with the characters, and you have to fall in love with the story and have a great deal of empathy for the story, and all of the characters, even the, villains, even though there isn't really a villain in this movie, I don't think. Um, you have to fall in love with wanting to tell the story and fall in love with the actors that you hire and want them to feel safe. And the way I think people feel safe is when they feel seen and heard and empathized with and honored for their selfhood. And I think crews feel it when you have empathy for them and understand that they're working hard and they need to be fed and taken care of. And when you treat people well, everybody wins because the crew will like lay down and die for you. And that's kind of, not to be too dramatic about it, but it's kind of like it's every day is really hard on a movie wanting to be this scope and costing as little as it did. And we had 21 days, so there's just all hands on deck has to be bringing their best self, and empathy plays into all of it. And as far as filmmaking goes, I see it in my head when I read it. And I go on the emotional journey, and then I have a real picture of it in my head before I get on to set. I do a ton of prep, of course. I usually watch comparables, comparable movies that inspire me to tell this story, like what other movies like this are telling a story like this. And don't ask me what I watched because I can't remember now. One of them was really surprisingly outside of the box. My falling in love with movies really happened when I was young. So a lot of the movies that compelled me to want to become a director and an actor, but mostly an actor, I guess, because that was my first thing, was my first job, was that I would have so much compassion for the characters. I mean, I'd just be sitting there like, oh my God. And I feel you, and you're telling me the truth. And by showing me this character, I know myself better. And like, for instance, Kramer versus Kramer, I saw when I was 12, I think, or 13. And I had lived my whole life after the divorce of my parents divorced when I was 6, thinking it didn't affect me. I mean, that was sort of the party line of the family. Like, we did it so perfectly, we uncoupled so consciously that like no pain was inflicted on you children. Well, that's just insane. I mean, talking about putting your head in the sand. And so it wasn't until I saw Kramer versus Kramer that I was like, I was sobbing in the theater because I was like, oh my God, this divorce affected me so profoundly, So I think we learn about ourselves through, images of people that we can relate to, and we can relate to every other human, and I think that's super, exercising the compassion of other people is like the greatest thing about what I do. So I think that as a filmmaker, the most important thing to me is the performance always. I think that's because I come from acting, but I also think because I know for a fact, and it's just a fact, that it doesn't matter if you have the most beautiful movie in the world with the best, cinematography or the best visual effects or the best everything. If the performances aren't there, no one cares. No one. We want and need someone to care about. And in a Kyra Sedgwick movie, you're going to care about a lot of people, and you're going to care deeply because that turns me on. I want to feel when I go to a movie.
I love that answer. I think I also admire you. I've heard you talk about like the bravery to step out of such a successful career. Emmys, 109 episodes of The Closer, I think like 74 other credits on IMDb, and to now, step into this new thing that wasn't a guarantee, and obviously you've nailed it, but I admire that bravery. And I think so many of us would love to have a little peek behind the curtains of like, when you're going into this, whether it was your previous TV shows or this film, when you're a newer director, let's say it, can you talk about when the performance isn't quite there? Like you've got the writing, you've got the right actor. Can you talk about the craft of giving notes, of advising a great actor to get the performance that you think the movie needs?
Yeah, it's terrifying. I mean, honestly, it's so funny. I think, first of all, it's terrifying when you feel like you're not getting it. It's so terrifying because you think, I'm not getting it. Oh, like this is the worst thing in the world. And I can't help this actor to go there. And, and you think, I'll never get back to this location. And this is our one chance and our one moment. So it's so incredibly stressful. I just want to say out loud, and terrifying. I mean, the whole thing is terrifying. I basically throw a lot of ideas around, first, if I try to go in one way, and this happens a lot with younger actors, if I try to go in one way and sort of talk about, character, the character arc, or where we are in the movie, or, sometimes that just doesn't work. Or I can somehow talk about emotional entry points, like when you're talking to him at this moment, it's terrifying for you, and like hit the emotional angle, and then sometimes that doesn't work. And then sometimes, as an actor who can, act, I'll do a line reading. I mean, like you gotta like kind of use all the tools in your toolbox, and some of them are sexy, and some of them are respectable, and some of them are not, and some of them are like, I'm gonna ask the other actor to scream as loud as he can at you so that I can get a response that I need. So it's all manner of technique, guessing, manipulation, and also, if you're really going head to head with an actor, it's usually because it's somewhere in the middle, and trusting the middle ground, and trusting that the camera's going to see something that I'm not necessarily going to see.
Well, such a great answer. Well, I only have about 4 more hours of questions, but instead I'm going to let Lindsay ask some.
Okay.
Well, Kyra, you're sitting here talking about getting a response and having empathy with these actors. You talked about falling in love with them, and you are literally in love with one of them that was in this recent show. Having had the privilege to get to interact with your husband, he's very, very intentional and an intelligent human being. Once he was in town for Sundance, we did a blanket drop at a homeless shelter. He took his time in the busy hustle and bustle of Sundance to come down to the rescue mission in Salt Lake City. And he, bundled up like a winter coat and had a little beanie on and walked in. And I was sitting in the audience when he was up on stage, and he was sitting quietly. And there was 2 homeless gentlemen, and one of them goes, "Is that Kevin Bacon?" And his buddy goes, "No." He's like, "No, asshole. Kevin Bacon's not in our homeless shelter. Like, no." So then Kevin stands up and goes, "I am Kevin Bacon. Like, nice to meet you all." And like, the guy punched him and just like celebrated like he won the football, won some football game. But I watched him interact with people, no matter the inundation of wanting a piece of him, and how he did that with so much grace and yet such loving boundaries. Like, I thought it was stunning. Like, I thought it was one of the most stunning. I've been around a lot of talent in public situations, and, in a homeless shelter, there's particularly, difficult dynamic of the mental health and the hygiene and the control aspect of a social setting. And I just watched him have so much grace and gentleness while keeping the boundaries that were appropriate. I just thought that was stunning. He's a great guy. And I'm sitting here thinking of being a woman on set as the director, who's his boss, who's married and goes home and stays in the same bed with him at night. And, you know, telling on myself a little bit, I've worked with my husband as the principal of my consultancy, and he would report to me, so to speak. And it is challenging. And I did not always give him the same grace I gave. In fact, I know I didn't give him the same grace I gave my other employees, which I'm horrified to say. It was hard because we know each other so well and we have these patterns, right? How did you navigate that with Kevin? And did you notice any of that coming up? And did you have cool hacks of how to work with your spouse, especially as a leader?
Well, first of all, we have worked together quite a bit in the space of director, actor, director, right? So he did a couple of episodes of Closer, directed, and I directed him in my first movie called Story of a Girl, and he was in that, and then he was in Space Oddity. So we've treaded that world before. We're incredibly respectful of each other in life, you know. We don't bicker a lot. We're not disrespectful, you know, is the only real word I can use it, even like about little things, you know. So I think that really helps, because you know someone's not going to disrespect you. If they don't really disrespect you at home, they're not going to disrespect you in front of the crew, which is, of course, like the thing you worry about the most, you know, with knowing someone too well. In my opinion, that's what I would worry about most, you know, like that's fine to say at home, but you don't say it here. Well, we don't really do that so much at home. So, you know, we do other things, but so I knew that I was okay there. What I did make sure to flag early on in when I was doing my first movie was, you have a lot of opinions, as do I, but don't, and I've seen it with other directors, you know, where he's like, why is, okay, I think it would be better if I do it this way. And what I said to him was, like, even questioning, like, why is the camera over there? You know, like those kinds of things. Because, you know, we've been around a really long time. We're allowed to do those things. We're like, you're allowed to do it anyway, but like especially allowed to do it when you're the old timer on set, you know. But I said to him, and I knew this before we started our first movie together, I said, if you have an idea that is not the idea that I've set up for, or you want to change something, or you think something's a bad idea, please just take me aside and do it on the down low, because everyone's watching us, you know what I mean, all the time, you know, especially in the beginning, you know, like the first few days are like, how is this going to be? And then they realize nothing to watch here, nothing to see here. It's so boring, you know what I mean? That they kind of back off. But I do think that people want to make sure that, you know, we're okay with each other, because nobody, you know what I'm saying. So anyway, so I did ask him to do that early on, and he's great. He's great about that. And also I basically said to him, just be nicer to me than you are to other directors. Not to say that he's not nice to other directors, because he absolutely is. But he can be, you know, he can get irritated. And I was like, just don't get irritated at me in front of everybody else. So that's great. That was our hack. Like,
that's amazing. That's a really good hack. Also, that's just like good marriage parameters. Like,
right.
Hey, hold me outside, because even if we're not two A-list celebrities in Hollywood where everyone is literally putting their cameras at us, people see us interact, and it says a certain thing about the dynamic, and people read into it. I think that's really lovely. That's amazing. So so this film is available. Where can our listeners go to see this film? With Apple Plus?
I think it's on Apple now, and it's on Amazon Prime.
Mm-hmm.
It's going to be on Hulu in July. I think towards like the end of July. But yeah, those other places. And then that'll be free. But I think you can rent it for a little bit now.
Amazing. What's next for you, Kyra? Like, are you in the middle? You're in this tour junket, like trying to get the film out as much as possible? Or I mean,
what's going on in my life right now is this horrible, you know, writer's strike, which is just like, it's, you know, I mean, what's going on in my life is so many things that are happening in the world that are untenable. And that too feels interestingly kind of parallel to some of the struggles that we're having as Americans currently with our, you know, with corporations taking over and not respecting individuals. And I mean, I can go on about that. But so I directed something before the strike in January for HBO Max. That'll be a show that I don't think it's airing until January. It's called Girls on the Bus. So I directed that. And yeah, and I've just been doing a lot of press for the movie. And I do think that this strike is going to last a while. So I think everyone's going to kind of, be off this summer and, or be, on unemployment this summer. Because I just think that we're really at a crossroads. But yeah.
And so if you come into a down season of time, being such an incredible achiever and such a force of energy,
it's really hard. I'm terrified.
Yeah, I was saying it's like a pattern disrupt. Like, what are you gonna do?
It's so funny. I love that you call it that. Yeah, no, I definitely. I mean, I was, as everybody was in this business, hoping to do something this summer. I have this incredible piece of acting that I want to do this summer that was going to be will be a film eventually, and we'll shoot it and it will happen, but it's just everything's on hold because of the strike. So it's scary. It's really scary. I love to be engaged. I love to be obsessed. I love to fall in love with something and get obsessed with it. It's what feeds me, right? So I feel sad about that, but there's always work to be done. There's always stuff to be reading, and I have a production company, and we're, becoming ready to do a lot of things. So there's always work to be done, but it is a scary time, I think, in the business, and just scary on a personal note to be, knowing that I'm going to need to be quiet and settled for the next few months.
That's awesome. That's amazing. Jess, you are probably, like you said, brimming with more questions.
Yeah, I definitely am. But first, I'm going to give a shout out to my sister-in-law, Becky Jones, because when we were getting ready to come to the studio, I was talking to my wife on the phone. She's with our sister-in-law, Becky. And I said, hey, guess what? On the show today, Kyra Sedgwick. But she's like, oh my gosh, I think she has the best hair in the whole world. My wife's like, really? She's like, yeah, she's my hair role model. I was like, that's it. I'm going to tell her. But I want to go back to this directing thing. For me, so often on the show, I get to interview founders who, maybe they've grown their company from a literal garage to over $1 billion now, or sometimes many billions. And they talk about having to qualify for their job, and they talk about mastery and that the version of them that got to this level isn't the version to get to the next level. And so often, as I hear what the role of a life of a director is like, it sounds like the CEO of a crazy startup that's trying to get it all figured out. And so I would love to hear any advice you have, maybe for other directors, as you think about mastering your craft. What do you think about?
Oh boy. I mean, I feel like that's sort of the great thing, right, about being an artist, is that there's never a top. There's never the bar is always getting raised in your head. And also, you're always getting to work on new things if you're lucky. And so you want to aim higher and higher, not necessarily bigger and bigger, although that sounds great. I mean, 21 days and the tiny little bit budget that we got, I would really like to move on from there. But tackling a bigger story, or in a different way and in a more mature way, I think that's one of the hardest things, is knowing that, the movie that I made today of Space Oddity, I love it, but it wouldn't be the movie that I'm going to make in 10 years. And maybe that version might be better. There's this part of me that's maybe there's a better version in 10 years. And, of course I would never wait, because, I'm impatient is my, middle name, but I know that I will get better as time goes on. I mean, every day I get to direct, I'm better. I'm a better director in the afternoon than I am in the morning. That evening I'm a better director, because I get new things that new obstacles that I have to overcome, or new insights that I'm seeing unfold in front of me, or whatever. especially when you get to do TV, because you get to play with everybody else's toys and be on everybody else's sets, and you're learning so much as you're going. And I never got to do many things that I got to do on like Ray Donovan and City on a Hill and all that stuff. So, do I have advice? I mean, I wish I had started earlier, being a director. I wish I started producing like just 10 years into my acting career. So that I sort of, I was bold enough to like sort of step into that. I think that my disease of being a girl, and what I mean by that is just that sometimes women, we're trained in, only to want a certain piece of the pie, or, don't ask for too much, or you can't do that, you're not qualified. I think all of those things got in the way of me making this step earlier than 50. And also I feel like you're ready when you're ready, and who cares, but I just kind of wish that, that I had more under my belt, because I think then I would, and again, this is just a story, right? But it sounds good, but like, it could not be true, but it might be true that, if I'd started 20 years ago, I'd be working consistently as a director, instead of like long periods of time when I'm not directing. Again, just a story I'm telling myself, and probably not very nice and supportive story, but it is a story I'm telling myself. So don't tell yourself stories, and just get out there and do it. And what I do think though is that right now with the iPhone, there's no excuse about like making a short. Like, make a short, make anything that you can point a camera to, or just do a scene, like cut something on your computer, or take a picture, or do some editing on your phone or whatever. I feel like all the smartphones have the ability to make video and to, edit. So I feel like that's something that, that I would advise. Also watch like all the great films, and there are many lists in the world of like great filmmakers who have made lists of their favorite movies. And, that could be really inspirational. Like Jane Campion has a list of all of her favorite movies. Like if you like Jane Campion, or, or Barry Jenkins, or, so that's like a film school that you can go to on your computer, or on your TV. I'm totally into things like Studio Binder, which is also a website that you can like learn about editing and learn about like what makes a great opening scene. But most of all, I think it's about thinking that you want to tell a story, and that you can tell a story in a unique way, and trusting that, trusting that ability and that desire. If it's what you have, that then no one will tell the story like you. No one will shoot the story like you. And that's worthwhile,
Yeah, I love that answer. I am, my two teenage daughters, of course, they don't listen to my show because it's their dad's show, but I'm going to make them listen to this episode because I really want them to hear that message. Thank you for sharing that.
And shit is scary, but like, do it anyway. Like the fear's not going to kill you. So what? You're scared. That's okay. You can be scared. Do it anyway.
Yeah. Well, I know we're winding down for time. Lindsay, why don't you ask a final question here?
Yeah, Kyra, I just, I thought it really struck me when you said this disease of being a woman. And, I know one of the things you've been really passionate about is about women's rights and the equality for anyone who's in a marginalized community of any sort, whether LGBTQ. You recently, have taken strides to try to address some of these things. When you are out there, do you find that, and you're having these conversations, one of the things that I found heartbreaking to me as a person who, I'm a political moderate, full disclosure, and I'm very left on a lot of social issues, and a little more conservative on like financial issues or whatever. But at the end of the day, like, what I'm heartbroken about is in this very polarized climate that we're so divisive, that these conversations are, people just shut down, and they feel so blamed, and they feel so, they don't feel heard, or the empathy that you're describing this with makes people feel safe. And I've found anytime I've ever had my mindset changed or had a paradigm shift, it's because someone gave me the space, not always, but someone either it hurt so bad that I had to change, or somebody loved me enough and gave me enough empathy to then help me see a better way, right? What have you found are the most useful tools in your position? Because I have to admit that sometimes in the Hollywood realm, the liberal media, it is just like this very, there's an energy that's angry and divisive that comes from that world. And then the right, they also are, totally guilty of that. And it just feels like we're all speaking in silos and preaching to the choir. And it's this, it just, how do we build a bridge? Do you have thoughts about that, or feelings, or?
God, I mean, I definitely have feelings about it. And my feeling is I wish we could. More than anything, because I think you're right. I think in the empathy and the understanding of each other, or at least the willingness not to just blanket think that somebody's utterly wrong because they believe in, they don't want gun control, I think we would have a better path forward. I do think I do think that it has a lot to do with finding out what connects us, with finding out that more things connect us than we think. I have more in common with a mom, who's a conservative right-wing person than I do, things that I don't agree with her about, like there's many ways in which I'm sure that we could come to at least understanding each other's priorities and what feels like a nourishing, safe world that they want to create for their kid, and a safe place to create for their kid. I think there is more that connects us than what separates us. I'm afraid, I fear that people make money on separating us, right? And that's the problem, is that
Yes.
so much is to be gained, again, by these corporations dividing us rather than bringing us together. It's just so heartbreaking. I don't know what the answer is, except to just always lead with kindness. And, when Trump was elected, I was so completely terrified and overwhelmed, and just, it wasn't my person, But my first inclination was not to be rageful, but to go, I want to get on a bus and go across the country and talk to other people who voted for this guy, and just talk to them. Because I need to understand, because with understanding comes some peace for me. So I didn't do that. Sarah Silverman did that. Don Lemon did that, right? But so these are just I probably have more questions than answers here, but those are just some of the things that I try to think about, and if I were to go to a very conservative state, try to be of service there. You know what I mean? Do what Kevin did, because then, you're meeting people where they are, and being of service is something that I can always do as a famous person, and everyone can do, anybody can do it. But I can also sort of make an impact in a positive way, because I do know that we have a lot of bad, we really have a bad reputation for being, very, very not understanding.
That's so. It's so tender to hear you talk about this desire to understand, and thank you for that heart, and thank you for the way you guys lead as a family and what you guys are about. And I've had such a joy getting to be on the peripherals of some of the things you guys are about, and this was so wonderful to interview you. Thank you so much for coming on our show, Kyra. We feel like it was such a treat, and you do win all the awards for the best hair. That's 100% accurate. Thank you. That's so
Thanks so
Thanks for
much,
coming.
guys. Thank you.
Thanks.
Take care.
Have a great day.
But
You too. Bye-bye.